Okay, my friends, let us do some live streaming. Hello, hello, where are we? Where am I? If there's anything. Oh boy, too many windows, too many monitors. Okay. I mean it this time. Let's do some coding. Hello, my name is Mike Bifulco. I am Technical Director for Gymnasium.com. We are a free online code school, dev school, tools, technologies, design, all kinds of good stuff from our courses for you types of creative folk and aspiring creative folk and developers and designers and all the other things in between. As always, our courses are free. They are self-paced, they are video-based, and they are taught by people who practice what they preach. They're instructors who do what they teach for a living, which is always refreshing. They're not just academics, so to say. So, it's Tuesday afternoon. I live stream my work. I'm a little disoriented today because I got delayed a bit getting back to my desk to get started here, but never fear, we're going to get moving. The plan is to continue where we were last week with a couple of little exceptions. So we're rebuilding Gymnasium using React, Gatsby, and Take Shape CMS. We are here to continue that work. Last week we were migrating, let's see if I have it running. We were migrating our jobs module to the new CMS. Let's talk about that. That is this guy here, which looks better. We were doing some layout stuff when I got off stream last week. In the interim, I did quite a bit of work to update some of the NPM dependencies for this project, and I want to get through some of that and rebase this branch before continuing work on it. So let's talk about how we're going to do that. First thing we need to do is get ourselves to a point where we're happy with this branch, where we can commit and push this code, and then we'll go and set up a rebase. In the background, I've got a couple of Dependabot pull requests waiting for me. I just approved this one. I'm going to merge and send these things up into outer space, and we'll let the other two rebuild, and as I go here, I'm going to come back to these to get these last two in before we go and do a big old rebase. So hopefully that made some sense. There's a lot of lingo that I'm throwing out, I suddenly realized, but if I can clarify anything, as always, jump into the chat or tweet at me or whatever it may be. I will do my best to keep Twitter and Twitch on deck on my monitor here, with which I am looking right now, to Twitch, upon Twitch I'm looking. And in them, otherwise, we'll continue to have done work. Okay, so let's take a look at the pending changes here and see what we can commit. So we were doing a lot to make this job module look correct. It's not 100% correct yet, but it's much better than it was. We've got this animation right, the column layout is working. If I go into responsive mode, which always takes a bit longer on stream because there's a lot going on here. Ooh, look, we have a few errors. I think we talked through these last time. They're largely bootstrap related things, and the fact that I'm using subtitle somewhere. Let's just get rid of that subtitle. There, hey, look at that, we can get rid of this. Span. And we'll make sure the CSS is not relying on that. Make that a dot subtitle. There we go, piece of cake. We just saved the world and got rid of one warning, which should be gone when this thing parses and recorrects itself. And we can grab our iframe as well, which I believe is this one. Which page is it complaining about an iframe on? Course about page, iframe, title equals about page YouTube embed. Now we don't have to see that warning ever again. Okay, cool. Use callback is defined but never used in the jobs view. Those are things we're going to get around to fixing. We did a bunch last week, but some of it was modernizing the reactitude of this component. We have some work to do to make that work more correctly. We're going to live with these warnings for now. That's funny. Component is defined but never used in job list. Well, that's easy to fix. Get rid of the easy warnings. Util is defined but never used. That's a funny one. Wonder where I was using util before. Well, we can check that out by going to the job list. See where util is being used. It may not have been used before. We got rid of a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's alright. Alright, well, if we're not using it, we don't need it. More warnings we get rid of, the healthier our code will be. That's good. Okay, so I'm going to hit save again just so we can regenerate those. Job table. Row is defined but never used. Goodbye. And jobs view, those two we're going to live with. Okay, so let's look at the browser warnings now. We can get rid of these. These are annoying. Those are the ones we were just talking about. In the browser, we have excess hidden. Oops. Oops. Come on. Excess hidden. All right. It's funny that those don't seem to be happy. I forget how to do it in the new syntax. Maybe it's excess 0. Does that work? You may never know. React Bootstrap. I always wonder what y'all are up to while I'm streaming. What are you guys just staring at me and like having lunch, eating some snacks, drinking some coffee? I got snacks. I bet you got snacks. All right, let's take a look on the call component. It is. This documentation could use a bit of a refresh. Container row call. All right, so it may be the case that 0 is fine. Yeah, okay. Well, we're gonna live with zeros on those, and that should have gotten rid of some of these browser complaints. We'll give this a refresh and take a look. Yeah, cool. Okay, so let's get a commit going just to keep this up to date. I'm actually gonna hold off on the rebase because I remembered a couple of things I want to do before I do that. So we'll do these one at a time. Add unique title to iframe embed to make lint warning go away. Boom. We're gonna say layout changes for find work. And actually some of these are probably going to be all related. Yes, that's related. Job table, all of this is going to be related. The job table and the jobs view and all that is going to get a big rehash today. So I'm just going to check all these in as one big kahuna right now. Okay, and we'll talk about how we're going to redo this, some of this work to make it a little happier. But, and actually in the meantime, I'm not going to worry about that rebase. I think I might have already said that. I don't recall. We can let some of these other guys fly in the background. This is an update to Storybook React from 5.10 to 11. Just a bug fix. Great. We'll approve. Let that thing go. Come on. We'll merge it. And I recently enabled the GitHub option, which lets me automate the deletion of the branch. So that branch is merged and gone, which is really nice. So then we'll let this guy rebase itself, and we'll merge that in a minute. I've been doing a pretty good job of staying up to date with those Dependabot tasks, but they come in when they come in, so it's best to stay on top of them. Okay, so now let's talk a bit about what we're going to do here. So how can I help visualize this? So on this page, we have a bunch of things going on. So let's look at the component tree. What's the best way to do that? We'll open the React Performance Tools. Nope, that's not what I wanted. I don't have React DevTools installed. That's odd. Oh, it's been disabled. Oh, yes, okay. I had installed a custom build of this for a bit. Great, okay. So we have now enabled that. I think means with a refresh of this guy, I should see it. Could be wrong. Oh, and I have an update for Chrome coming. Okay, well, fine. We'll work around it. So on this page, we have the jobs page. In it, there is the jobs view. The jobs view has either a job table or a job list, and those both have job listings. Yeah, it looks like this. So right now, what we're missing, see how best I can explain this, is this jobs view needs a handful of parameters passed into it to correctly function. The jobs view is what decides whether to display a table or a list. That is handled by way of routing. So some of this stuff is handled. It also does the API request to load jobs. And when the market changes, it manages that to reload jobs. And then we can look on the job page. I'm sorry, it's not the jobs page. I mislabeled that. That is the index home page. So if I look on the home page, pages index.js. On here, we have some markup that includes find work. So we'll make this as thorough as we can. Find work contains jobs, which is the jobs component. So let's get that in there. Going to be specific about that because this will get confusing fast if I don't. The jobs component contains a router which picks, which basically forces some information into props for this based on what URL we've been given. So let's how do we convey that here? So this has a router. The router renders the jobs view, right? Let's just be thorough here. So all of these are jobs views. And the magic that's happening here is this is setting up the view, the latitude, longitude, and market ID as needed. And then within the jobs view, it does all the magic that we had already talked about. So if I go to jobs view, this guy decides whether to display a table or a list. And then into those, it passes some jobs, market, a loading flag, which is interesting that we're not using that here. The job table and the job list have slightly different props for initial market and whatnot. At their heart, the job table and the job list are essentially identical. I even have this wrong. So job listing, this has a job table row. The real difference is the markup that happens here. So the problem that I see right now in the way that this thing is built is that if we go into the job table, it's pretty simple. It takes in some jobs and some other props, the market, and a handful of other things. And it displays everything. It also displays this drop down, which is used to trigger a change in market, and a button which is used to navigate to another page. No, I'm sorry, that also switches the market. Huh. Oh, I see. Yes, this sets the market in the state, local state for this component, not in the state for the application. We're good with that. Now what we want to do, what we need to do, is contrast this with the jobs view. No, I'm sorry. Boy, this is going to get confusing fast. With the jobs list. And in the list, there's a lot of stuff going on here which is similar, where we have all these job listings and whatnot. But what we don't have is like a unified way to say, hey, a market change was requested. The thing above this thing should run that and get us back out. And so importantly, what I want to do is make sure that they're both implemented using function implementation, functional components, I think maybe it's called, which they are. And then I want to make sure that their APIs are similar underneath. So this is one of those things where likely TypeScript would be very helpful. We could use a generic type to pass these things in and have them in charge of their own logic for display. But right now we're not doing a great job of that. So I want to basically make sure that these have the exact same API. So job table should have an initial market and jobs and a market and on request market change and loading. And right now this doesn't have initial market. Right, so these should look identical, ideally. Yeah, and so we're working on that. All right, give me just 1 second. I'm gonna go let this monster out of her pen. The kitten we've rescued has been shouting at me for like 10 minutes now. I'll be right back. Okay, that was easy. Now hopefully she doesn't jump on me and stab me in the legs. So, all right. So what I was saying is that this initial market was missing from the jobs list, and we should look at how to implement that. So I'm gonna close a bunch of these open things. I'm gonna get rid of this view. Well, maybe I'll leave it. It's useful. So we want to compare, what did I change here? Oh yeah. We want to compare job table and job list and how they're implemented. So I'm going to close the jobs view. I'm going to move this guy to the left. I'm going to pull these things side by side and we'll look at how they work. Now part of the goal here is to eliminate repeated code, as always. And so we might have some opportunities for doing that. But the other part is to standardize on the functionality for these two guys. Oh God, Man, my laptop is suffering. Let's see if it's running a time machine backup. It is always running a time machine backup when I'm streaming. No, let's skip that. Give it a second for that to actually stop. Okay, good. All right, maybe it'll get a little quicker now. So let's look at how these things work. So the job list. All right, this is the one that didn't have the initial market. So we need to use that initial market. That's okay. Right, like we can see there's some of this stuff that's already not been working here. And I can already tell you that there's going to be some repetition that we're going to work on getting rid of. You can see, like, it's always a bad thing when you're copying and pasting code across two files. That starts to not feel good. So the difference between the job list and the job table is in the listing view, which is, market has already been declared. Yep. How do we tackle that here? Oh yeah, okay, that's an important difference too, is that this guy, the job table, isn't actually using the market that's being passed into it to display the market. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. Two things. We're gonna rename this to selected market. Oh man, I'm getting attacked. Hello, creature. All right, we're gonna call this drop down selected market, and this set market we're gonna change to set drop down selected market, which will be a little more verbose, but that's what we want. We want this to be descriptive of what's going on here. So we're working on that. So we'll probably work on the job list first and make this thing work in a way that's functional, and then we'll pass this behavior on to its parent component, wherever that is. Oh, because I get stabbed again. All right, I don't need this. I'm not listening to anything. Okay, so let's talk about that. So we've got this form here is actually kind of suspect too. I don't think we need a form there. Yeah, interesting. Okay, what I was saying is this is the job table. I want to make sure I've got that right. View all jobs and if I got that right, a little exclamation point should appear there once this thing re-renders. Jeez. Oh, jeez. We're getting attacked. Ah, looks like this is done in the background. So we're gonna just check what changed here. Some showcase stuff. Yeah, okay. Weird that updates to Gatsby are like things about their website sometimes. What you gonna do? Okay. That's the thing with those mono repos from Lerna too, is you get a lot of confusion and needless updates. All right, so we can close that. It looks like this is actually right. So this is the job list that we're looking at right now. So I'm gonna get rid of that because we don't need it. And we're gonna create an effect here. So we're gonna do use effect, and this is gonna be use effect, and that'll be the effect, and these will be the array of things. It'll take initial market, market.id, on request, market change. I believe all of those will be needed. What this is going to do is say when market changes. So, oops, actually we want drop down selected market. When that changes, we're going to say on request market change, and this actually doesn't take any parameters. How is that right? Ah, I see. Set market. Okay, so okay, so that'll be one. We're going to have a couple of similar looking effects here. And actually, these are not going to be similar. We're going to do this the right way. So when we get an initial market, we're going to say set drop down selected market to initial market. That's great. What did I do here? I did something wrong. Okay, so we set the initial market, and then when the drop-down selected market changes, we will request new market updates, whatever, from the parent. Make sense? I hope so. On market changed here, we're going to do set drop-down selected market. I think that's all we need to do. So what that's given us is two hooks, which will let us listen to when the initial market is passed in to set the initial view, and then when that market changes, it'll go and fire off the parent's API commands to feed new markets into this thing. Yeah, that should do. I hope. I don't know, maybe I'm thinking about it wrong. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Okay, so let's refresh this page. And then we're gonna change that drop down from Charlotte to, I don't know, Boston. Charlotte, Boston, viewing jobs in. That didn't do what I wanted. It's actually showing a weird amount of things. So, viewing jobs in. I wonder if I'm creating some bad cyclical juju right now. Sounds like I might be. Market of type strings applied to job listing. Expected object. Job list. Okay. So this is getting a string at some point. We should take a look at that. Jobs view JS71. What's this here? Oh, and of course I wanted to do that to this guy. Oh boy. Okay, well, that's all right. All right, great. That's a little less shouty. So we can see that the market is currently set to Charlotte. If I select Boston, then I'm just passing in a 10. So I've done something incorrect here. Okay. So that means that this on market change isn't working right. So jobs table, what's going on in there? Ah, yeah, okay. And that's where the util will come in that I got rid of before. And actually that maybe should be, yeah, that should be in, my ankle got bit. That should be in the drop down. This logic should definitely be there. So we're gonna do that. But first let's prove that this works by copying and pasting that reference in. And we'll see if this works. Uh-oh, set market is not defined. Okay, we're gonna refresh. And so it's currently set to Charlotte, and it's a robust object, and now it's set to Boston. That's great. And look at that, that was updated pretty quickly too. Very good. All right, so here's where we can start to make some goodness happen. So we're gonna do the market drop down. In here, we're going to grab that util. Great. And then handle market changed, we're going to send back, instead of a market ID, we're going to get that market. From the ID, and we're going to say market D. And then we're going to return the market. And that actually shouldn't have disrupted anything, I don't think. Ugh. Okay, let's refresh this. Oh, and actually let's go then and get rid of so then this can be a little more simple. And then in job table, we can do the same thing. That's already simpler. That's lovely. All right. Now, did it work? That's a different story. It's a bad thing. Oh, damn it. It's a bad thing when the kitten here wants to sleep underneath the legs of my office chair. That's really dangerous, man. Stop. Well, maybe I should use the stand part of my sit-stand desk for once. All right, so if I switch from Charlotte to Boston, it works. If I switch from Boston to Houston, it works. We're getting new jobs. All that stuff is working. So we've made that a little better. Let's go into the jobs view and see what isn't being used here. Handle jobs loaded. This seems like no longer necessary. We can get rid of that. And then use callback. Oh yeah, okay, we thought about that briefly last week, but it turns out we didn't need it. So, in theory, that should have compiled, should have gotten rid of some warnings. Job table now has a reference to util that it doesn't need. It's handy. Okay, and look at this. So if I clear this out, reload the page, I don't think we'll see any warnings any longer. Ooh. Job list also still references util. One more refresh. Okay, so no warnings. A functional component, meaning functioning component, I should say. Cool. It did also default to my locale, which is a little tricky to test, but should work otherwise. We also upped some logic into the component where it belongs. Don't need this any longer. And we can probably re-implement this guy. Yeah, so we'll work on the market dropdown for a bit. What I'm going to do is check in those changes. Unify logic for table and list of jobs. All right. So that much is handled. Now let's talk about this market dropdown. So I'm going to get rid of the list and the table. We'll test the table in a minute too. The market dropdown is clearly implemented using the old project style, which is fine. It actually works. But primarily what we want to do is change this CSS to a CSS module so that that style is only used when it's needed. I'm pretty picky about this right now because this will make future work a lot easier. And you'll know what that means in a second here. So visually hidden. Great. There's a little ESLint action happening there. Okay, so that should not have affected really anything, except that it will have helped us chunk up our markup a little better. Did it still work? Still a functioning dropdown? We do. Oh yeah. Oh boy. Okay, I need to get rid of that debug content in the jobs view. That is this, and this, and this, and this. Switch to CSS, oops. Switch to a CSS module. That's nice. That's a pretty simple one too. And now we can focus on what else is going on in this market dropdown. Now, I should be clear that if you're working on a React project and you have code that uses this extends component, which is sort of the old React syntax, the guidance from the React team actually is just to kind of leave it. If it's working, it'll continue to work and it will purportedly always be backwards compatible. But I think it's also interesting to see how these things can be reproduced using the new syntax. So I'm going to do that here by adding use state here and just showing you what's going on. So literally the entire reason we had this 7-line constructor was so that we could set a state value from the initial market ID. In the new world, it becomes easier. So you would change this first of all to a const, and you would do props, and then that. And there's a couple of things going on here. So everything becomes the render function, right? So we don't need render. We can get rid of this. We can kill off this constructor logic, which all it did was it set the market ID, oops, sorry. This constructor logic set the market ID to the initial market ID. So we're gonna do const market ID set market ID equals use state initial market ID. That's all. That one line gets rid of all of this stuff. That's a plus. And then we have to look out for set state, and instead of this dot set state, this will be set market ID to and then this is going to be, we'll rename this to drop down selected market ID. Great. Okay, now where does handle market change get called? There are actually a couple other things we need to do. So anytime I see this dot props, that should become just props. This dot market drop down. What is that? Market drop down. Okay, this is a ref, which we might have to work on a bit too. That's okay. So we've got this state that we use for handling the market ID. We've got the handle market change logic, which is a function that gets called when the market changes. In other words, when the drop down, its value is changed. And then the presentation logic for the component. And is that it? That might be it. So this is actually a pretty simple conversion, but I think we're still going to have to do some work to work with the ref. Let's find out. Okay, market ID has already been declared. Yep, we no longer need this dot state. Cool. And so we've got an initial market ID coming in props. Ooh, I'm getting a phone call. Give me just a second here. Hey, I'm live streaming. I'll call back in 30. Okay. So we know that the props has the initial market ID. Actually, we're just going to do it this way. And that's all. That's all we had to do, I believe. Okay, so now we should still have it. I thought those were gone. Cannot set property market dropdown of undefined. Right? Okay, that's a little confusing. Okay, it's not working right now. I'm betting it has to do with that ref that I haphazardly slapped in there. So, there's a nice hook for that. useRef. UseRef returns a mutable ref object whose .current property is initialized to the past argument initial value. The return object will persist for the full lifetime of the component. Boom. So it should look like this. So we're going to add a useRef, comma, and we're going to say what did we call it? Market dropdown. Use ref null, and then down here we no longer need this, and the only other change that we need is anywhere we reference market dropdown, we need to say current. And that's lowercase market dropdown, the reference element that we just created. Let's see if that made the difference. Yes, it does seem to have. So if I change this to Boston, we get an error. Awesome. Can't read property selected index of null. Okay. What are we doing wrong here? Oh, yeah. I still have to do that. So I have to say ref equals market dropdown on this, which actually hooks that ref up to the DOM component. Okay, we'll refresh this guy. And so now, hopefully I should have a working ref, which basically means that React knows about this select box. And now I've got jobs for Boston showing up, jobs for Detroit showing up, and Minneapolis, and Moline, and all the other ones. Lovely. Okay, cool. So that changed this component just a bit, but I think it's a reasonable reasonable example to give, just because this will theoretically be more maintainable for us in the future because it's a little easier to read. Yeah, and we're actually doing some magic with market IDs and stuff like that. That might not be strictly necessary, but I think that's okay. Actually, could we make this simpler still? Do we even need that? We could set the value to market. Well, yeah, no, we're gonna leave it. There's an argument to be made for both sides of this, I think. But if I set all these values to these different market objects, so to all of these, it would really swell the stuff being stored in memory there to an extent. I don't know. Or I guess being stored in the DOM directly. We're gonna let it slide like this. I could see the use for the other implementation. It would essentially remove 99% of this. Let's give it a shot. I don't know. It shouldn't be any slower performance-wise. So let's make sure that that will work. Okay, so, 1 second, sorry. Okay, and so we're going to change this. So now let's explain what we've done here. So all of the options will have the market stored as their value here. So when this select changes, on market changed, we'll pass the value into this guy. Actually, there's probably even a better way to do this still, I think. Yeah. Okay. So we can do market dropdown dot current. Okay, gonna be a slight change here. Is that right? Did that do the thing? No. One too many of those. Great, okay. So we now have market being stored in the state. I'm messing with a lot of a lot of things here, but that's okay. Or is it value equals market? Yeah, actually, this may be like doubly redundant, so we may not need this. We might not need... Oh, I see what that was for. Okay, so that's telling this initially to have its value set. I'm good with that. Yeah, I'm running myself in circles here. So, handle market changed should take in, well, it'll fire when the market value changes in that component. We need that from the props. We need the selected index of, actually, I think we can just do, all right, let's try this. Okay, I think that'll do it. Let's find out. It's very possible I broke quite a few things here. We can figure that out. Refresh this guy. Okay, something's not right here. So, let's start here. When I refresh, we'll hit that debugger line. This will say, ooh, what? Why are we debugging there? Hold that thought. Weird. Okay, so what it should do is, I don't know why that breakpoint is stopping there. That doesn't make any sense to me. Okay. I see. I've done something wrong here. Let's look at the use state reference. Okay, returns a stateful value and a function to update it. During the initial render, the returned state is the same as the value passed to the first argument initial state. So I just did this wrong. So this should be const initial market ID, or initial market equals util.get market from ID. Great. And then we can say here, use state, this should be like that. Spectacular. So we'll let this thing recompile. We will reload it. Oops, sorry, reload the wrong page. We'll reload this guy, which should no longer have a debugger in it. Then we'll scroll down here. That's still not right. We can fix that. So it's possible that this value scheme that I got here isn't going to work for us. Yeah, okay. I think that is in fact the case. So it was worth a shot. We're learning a bit here. So let's look at what happens here. So put a debugger line in there. What I think is happening is when we have complex objects set as the value, they might not be passed correctly, or I might not be accessing them correctly. So I'm going to change this to Denver. And we can see in this, oh man, these breakpoints are not working right now. Damn, okay, we're going to use console logs then. So great, we've got our selected market. We're going to grab the, I don't even know if anything comes in there, but we'll grab the event value, event, swap over to the console, clear it out. We're going to change markets and see what we get. To Denver once again. Oh boy. Circular structure to JSON. Okay. Well, not good. Selected market is. Aha. Okay, not ideal. Let's try that. Give it a refresh. Okay, at least this time we got an ID. So do selected market index, and then we're going to say how did we do that before? dot options, boom, dot value. Great. All right, sounds like we might be getting a thunderstorm here too, which likely means my power will go out at some point. So if it does, I'm sorry about that. Fun thing about coding is that it always breaks before it gets fixed. Selected market is object. Great. Why don't these seem to be... Uh-oh. I don't know what's up with breakpoints not working today. That makes this all a little more frustrating. I'm probably due for an update to my browser and a reboot, but we'll pretend to ignore that for now. Okay, what do we got? What? Oh. Okay, it's come full circle here. So, is literally a string that says object because what we've done is we've tried to set a DOM element value to an object. That's stupid of me. Okay, so most of this exercise we just did won't really help. Yeah, bummer. And of course I didn't commit when this was working last. So we're going to undo for a while. Sorry, I learned something today. It was probably obvious, but I learned something good. Okay, that should get us there. Market is not defined. What are we complaining about here? 51, not 14. Okay. Equals market. Drop down. Okay, and in theory, just like that, we're back to having a functioning component that shows me jobs for Boston, Baltimore, Oz. Apparently there's nothing in Charlotte right now because it's doing the fallback behavior. Interesting. Okay, well, let's commit this thing while I've got it working. So market, drop down to hooks, implementation. All right, so what did we just do? We swapped this thing over to using hooks, mostly as an exercise in education, just to kind of show how that would work. Learned a bit. You obviously, well, now obviously can't pass a complex object into this because this is just rendering HTML. So this, when I had just market here, it was turning into the string object, which is not good. Yeah, and so now we have a fully implemented market dropdown. We've got the jobs things in line. What I'm curious to see is this is the job list, how the job table looks, which we can start to tackle probably on next week's stream from this page. We'll throw it up here, where I believe there's one right now, or maybe down here, and start to debug that view and make that all come together. So yeah, thanks for your patience and listening to me meander, Justin and Andrew as always, and everyone else who's on stream. Quite a few people today. Yeah, I'll be back this time next week. We'll do more of this stuff. I will have probably done that rebase nonsense I was talking about in the interim. And until then, yeah, have a good week. I'll catch you next week. Find me on Twitter at Irreverent Mike, and you can subscribe to me on Twitch at the same name, Irreverent Mike. I'll see you then. Take care, everyone.